Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, we have our greatest uncle in the universe mug. Again, got it for pet sitting. A good friend of mine's rabbit makes me the greatest uncle in the universe. Inside of it, we have some tension tamer from Celestial Seasonings because my brain hurts a little bit right now, and we're hoping to fix that as quickly as possible here because headaches suck, straight up. But that's not why we're here. Why we're here is instead today to talk about the different schools of magic and what that might mean for your Dungeons & Dragons game. So let's go ahead and let's dive into it, shall we? So, to start, there are 8 different officially listed schools of magic in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. You might be saying to yourself, well, what? Hang on, what do you mean? There are bard colleges, there are wizard schools, what is going on here? I'm here to tell you that it's neither of those things. Bard colleges are just bard subclasses. Wizard schools are just wizard subclasses. Though wizards do have a school of blank subclass for every single one of the official schools of magic. Those 8 schools of magic are in alphabetical order because that's the only order I really have them in. Abjuration, Conjuration, Divination, Enchantment, Evocation, Illusion, Necromancy, and Transmutation. So, those are the way that spells are broken down in 5th edition. It is honestly a pretty complete system. There's some weird sort of crossover things every once in a while that don't make a whole lot of sense, but that's okay. It's a game with a bunch of rules that sometimes don't make sense together, and that is a-okay, and that is how it works. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk through each one of them. But first, before we do that, we want to go ahead and talk about what maybe they are as a whole. The Dungeon Master's Guide in Chapter 1, actually, talks about magic in your world. It talks about how you can define the schools of magic in any capacity that you want to in your individual world. It talks about how they can be just that. They can be, the existence of these in the world, and it's just different categories of magic. Or it could be literal schools of magic, and it could be that, you go to this specific place to learn all about conjuration magic, and you go to this specific place to learn all about illusion magic, etc., etc. You can have them be incredibly rare so that people have to go search far and wide to find out about, this one specific thing. You can do whatever you want to with them. That is the thing that they tell you in the DMG. And I recommend coming up with some sort of system that they kind of follow in your world if you want to have any sort of magic college system as a whole. It's a really good way to sort of break down the things that you can actually put into those magic colleges. Because if you do that, then you have some of the groundwork laid already for you because they've got it broken out into the 8 different schools. So it does kind of help just sort of offhand. It could be that, people go to school for 8 years and each year they learn about one of them. It could be that there are 8 different colleges scattered all over the world. People go to those different colleges to become experts in that specific thing. If you look at, I guess specifically wizard subclasses, you will see that there are several that are outside of the school of blank types, and that's because, again, the wizards that follow those particular school paths are not specialized in that necessarily. They just happen to do that better than other things. But those school of whatever wizards are not necessarily beholden to that specific kind of magic exclusively. But we're not talking about the wizards. We're talking about the magic at its core. So let's go ahead and let's start going through each of these individually, shall we? Again, we're just going to run down these in alphabetical order. I'm going to give a sort of a quick summary, a couple of example spells, and then talk about it a little bit. So first up is probably the most confusing because it's really the only one that is not as common of a word, it feels like. I mean, I guess there are a couple of them that aren't super common words, but if you're a nerd in general, you know most of these, except for this one. Abjuration. It might not be a real word at all. I'm not positive. I had not heard it before I started playing D&D, and it took me a while to remember what it actually means. It took me a while to remember what any of the schools of magic meant, but this one was the hardest one for me for some reason, even though it's very straightforward. So Abjuration is the school of magic that encompasses general protective sort of magic. Shielding magic, stuff that will prevent certain types of things from happening to you. Notable spells in that, for each of these, I have a 1st level and a 9th level picked out. We've got Shield, as our first level spell, it is a literal shield. It just is what it is. And Prismatic Wall, which, if you don't know what that does, it's a fantastic spell that conjures up. See, there you go, conjures up. It abjurates up. No, it creates this wall of multicolors that does crazy amounts of damage as things try and move through them, and obscures things on the other side. So Abjuration is a really, really phenomenal school of magic because, well, I think it's a really phenomenal school of magic because it is the protective one. It is the one that helps you sort of buff your allies in a lot of different ways, buff yourself in certain ways as well, in terms of making it harder for you to actually be hit, because it is a protective based magical subtype. The things that you get out of the Abjuration School of Magic will be things that protect you. And I really like Abjuration spells. I think they're really cool. I think that they're cooler than what I would consider to be the most popular, maybe, in this set of 8, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Moving down the list, we have Conjuration, which is obviously the school of conjuring stuff, which is where the line gets a little fuzzy for me sometimes, because it feels like Conjuration should be anytime you conjure anything up. But that's not necessarily it, because Conjuration, find familiar. Good first level spell that is a Conjuration spell, or you're conjuring up a familiar. But also, Wish is a Conjuration spell, which feels wrong to me. I could see the argument for it, but it feels like it's in the wrong school of magic, because to me it feels like it should be a couple down the list, down in Evocation. But I also do understand technically why it's in Conjuration instead, because it could like create anything really at all. And so it's odd, but I understand. Conjuration obviously encompasses all kinds of conjuring based things. All of your conjure animals, conjure woodland beings, conjure etc. is going to fall under Conjuration. Conjuration specializes in creating things that were not originally there, that are a reality, essentially. So, like, find familiar, you get yourself a cat or a turtle or whatever, because you have conjured it forth. Wish, you conjure up an effect of some sort in the world. And so it's one of those things where, again, for me, the line on it is a little funky, and I would be hard-pressed necessarily to pick out all of the spells in a list that were Conjuration spells if they didn't all have Conjure Blank as their title, but there are several of them that aren't that way, like both Find Familiar and Wish. They are not listed as, like, Conjure Familiar or Conjure Wish. It is Find Familiar and Wish. So check on those to make sure that you are using a Conjuration spell if you're leaning towards Conjuration magic. Next down the list, we have Divination magic. Divination magic is sort of the answering magic, the magic that will answer stuff for you. The things we have there are Detect Magic as our first level spell, and Foresight as our 9th level spell. You don't know, Foresight is the it lets you, it essentially gives you advantage on everything you do for 8 hours, I want to say. It essentially lets you see approximately 3 seconds into the future, not a full round, not enough to like be able to outdo something necessarily, or to prevent something from happening, but enough to make it so you can react better to it. But Divination magic is what is going to be what you use to discern information a lot of times. Detect magic allows you to detect kinds of magic. It will let you discern the type of magic that is going on there. It will let you discern if there is magic going on there. Detect magic, easily a divination spell. Another one of the like highly notable ones in there is scrying. Scrying is a divination spell that lets you go spy on someone from somewhere else. It's something that is incredibly helpful to actually use if you have access to it, because it lets you spy on people. It's a really great spell for that specifically, and I think that more people really should use it, but that's not really the point, is it? Love Divination magic. It's another one that I really like because it's not control. Divination magic, generally speaking, is less useful in combat. Not saying that it's not useful. I'm saying that as a whole, not as useful, because it is more of a like preparatory kind of thing. And I really like being someone who's prepared when I go into situations, even though I play low wisdom characters who like to not know what's going on. Next down the list, we have Enchantment Magic. Enchantment Magic encompasses things like Charm Person as our first level spell, all the way up to the infamous Power Word Kill. And you might be asking yourself, how on earth is Power Word Kill an enchantment spell? Enchantment Magic is, you would think, obviously, magic used to enchant things. But, and you would be right, technically, but also, it is magic used to enchant people, as evidenced by Charm Person. They are the spells that exist to, you know, create an enchanting presence more than anything else. You can enchant anything with any of the schools of magic. Like if you are trying to enchant a sword with a certain spell and you go through the whole process, whatever your table's process is for enchanting items, you don't necessarily have to be using enchantment magic. You can be using conjuration magic if you want to. Like it could be that you are enchanting the sword with the ability to conjure barrage or something like that. I don't know. So enchantment magic is not necessarily the act of being able to enchant something. It is more the act of being able to create enchanting things that allow you to then help control people a little bit better. So I like enchantment magic quite a bit. I also think that the enchantment wizard subclass, this is a little bit tangential, is highly underrated. I think that it's so good. Split enchantment is one of my favorite features in the wizard subclasses that doesn't get used enough. Not the point, though. Moving down the list one more, we have Evocation, just past the halfway point here. Evocation is what most people think of when they think of destructive kinds of magic. In it, we have Magic Missile and Meteor Swarm as our two sort of ends of the spectrum. Evocation magic is something that evokes an effect. It evokes some kind of reaction with the environment around you, which is a confusing way to say this is where most of your, like, straightforward damage-dealing kind of spells are. Obviously, Magic Missile, you fire magical missiles at something. Meteor Swarm, you fire meteors at something. Like, it evokes this effect, a lot of times resulting in damage, almost always resulting in damage, actually. Evocation is your, like, fireball wizard more than anything else. It is what people think of when they think of the blasty kind of wizard. There are a lot of evocation spells on that spell list. Next down the list, we have the Illusion School of Magic, which is another one that I think is very interesting. I don't love it as much as I probably should, but I do think that it's very, very cool and has some really cool implications. The spells that I have picked for that one are Disguise Self and Weird. Illusion Magic is a school of magic that really sort of stretches to me. It stretches into a little bit of conjuration, a little bit of enchantment in my mind, because it can create illusions that are so realistic that they are semi-real in certain very specific cases, and it can create illusions that are specifically affecting a single creature in their mind in the same way that an enchantment kind of spell would be. That is actually where Weird falls. It is something that targets specific creatures and affects their mind with stuff that only they can see. Similar to, like, a... oh my god, I forgot all of... I have lost all of the other spells that exist in this game in my head all of a sudden. So we're going to just slide right past that and pretend that that didn't happen. So our obvious, you know, initial thought on illusion magic is going to be Disguise Self and that kind of thing. Something that, like, masks you. Invisibility... Disguise Self, that type of thing is going to be what you're thinking of. But this does extend to, as I mentioned, Weird, and I just thought of it, Phantasmal Force, that kind of thing. Something that plants something in somebody else's mind. I believe Modify Memory is also an illusion spell, technically, but I'm not super positive. I'm actually going to go ahead and try and look it up while I just continue talking here. So it is... Illusion is one of those schools of magic that stretches a little bit past its borders in my mind. But nope, enchantment, Modify Memory is enchantment. Ignore me. See, that's what I mean. It gets a little bit muddy in terms of, like, what side certain things might fall on of that line. Kicking down the list from there, we have Necromancy. This one is very straightforward. Necromancy is the magic of affecting life in certain ways. In this, I have pulled Inflict Wounds and... True Resurrection. There we go. This one is interesting because while it does have healing spells on the list, such as True Resurrection, which allows you to bring something back to life, The spells like Cure Wounds and Healing Word actually do fall under the Evocation school of magic. Again, creating an effect on the environment around you. But Necromancy largely does follow the, like, either dealing necrotic damage to something or affecting life itself. False Life, also a Necromancy spell, gives you hit points, or temporary hit points, I guess, technically. It's something that will affect sort of the life force, is what falls under the Necromancy. Though, again, several of them fall under Evocation as well. One that feels almost a little bit too small for its borders, whereas something like Illusion, a little bit too big. And finally, we come to Transmutation. This one is the affecting and changing of matter. This one, I feel like, gets stepped on a little bit by other schools of magic, but that's fine because it also has a pretty hefty footprint in its own right. This one I have pulled Catapult and Shape Change as our two spells for it, but this is obviously also where things like Polymorph are going to exist. It is a transmutation spell that allows you to affect the physical form of something. Transmutation is the act of changing one thing into another thing, and that's just the way it goes. So, transmutation magic, something that changes things from one thing to another. As straightforward as that, honestly. And those are 8 schools of magic. Use them in the world in whatever way you want to. Hopefully you can use some of the things I've said here to actually help you remember what they are, because it took me a while to, like, actually sort out what each of them was and what they each did. But honestly, once you get it, it kind of clicks and it just makes sense. It's not terribly difficult for you to keep them in your head once you have them. So I hope that this was actually kind of helpful to you. Moving on from that, not what we are actually talking about, streams and shows that we have today and tomorrow. We have, in no particular order here on today, Monday, The Paper Dungeon, Chromatic Dice, Beyond the Realms, Unprepared Casters, Greetings Adventurers, Bards of New York, Hapless Heroes, Alien Adventures, Cast Party, 3 Black Halflings, Hello from the Magic Tavern, King Leo D&D, Anti-Heroes Anonymous, The Tabletop Tavern, Top of the Round, and League of Lady Adventurers. And then tomorrow we have Diary of a Dragon Pit, Star Wars First Resistance, Dungeons and Daddies, Bombarded, Hekva D&D, Glass Cannon, and the Queer Questers. Please check them out. Let them know that I sent you, because again, someday somebody's going to say something about it to me, and I'm going to think that it's very funny. But until then, we're just going to keep it rolling, and I'm going to keep asking you guys to do so for me, because it has become part of the whole, like, shtick at this point, honestly. But that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So, thank you very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the description of this episode. I don't think I have anything else from here. I am just kind of here. I'm a little spacey right now, and I don't super know why. So hopefully this video was cohesive. So with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.